All right, joining the podcast now from The Athletic, Tom Bogert. Thank you, Tom, for joining the show. Let's get to the transfer window. We're kind of looking ahead to the transfer window, and obviously you mentioned an extra time a few times that the Revs they bought out Djordje Petrovic. They look to be buyers, and I think a lot of Revs fans are excited about the upcoming window. Who do you see as being a fit for the Revolution? Where do you see them targeting?
Going on, guys? First of all, thanks for having me. Yeah, they're definitely going to be buyers. Again, by moving Josie out, like using the buyout on Djordje Petrovic, which, I want to go back to, is that's a significant thing. It's easy for the three of us to look at the Revs or the Galaxy and just be like, why didn't the Galaxy buy out Douglas Costa, or why didn't this team? It's easy to spend other people's money. So I do want to point out that was at least 2 years left on Josie's deal at a pretty significant number that the Revs obviously still have to pay. The only relief here is salary cap. So I want to point out that was a very good win now type of move for this team that, so let's say, in recent years has been very good and very ambitious, but in the past not so much. So I want to be able to point out the good news. So yeah, Djordje Petrovic has been bought out a few weeks ago, and with that comes a lot of salary cap flexibility. Beyond that, they also put Dylan Borrero on the season-ending injured list. That opens up a U22 initiative slot and some other kind of mechanism. So within that, they have plenty of room. I'm expecting a winger to come in. I'm expecting a defense-minded midfielder, whether it's a number 6 or a box-to-box, somebody else that can play with Polster and give Polster kind of another option for the rare times that he's not available to play. But yeah, so those are kind of the two spots that I'm assuming the Revs are going to add this summer.
And you mentioned too, the Dylan Borrero was put on the season-ending injury list that opens up the U22 slot. Our listeners are big roster rule nerds, so they know that when you have if you have two U22 players, you can't have that third designated player. You need to have him be a young designated player. So we've speculated on whether or not the Revs would go down that road because it might restrict them when Gustavo Bo's contract is up for next season, having Borrero and then another U22. Do you think a U22 player is a possibility for the Revolution, and is that an avenue they're looking at?
It's a possibility. I'm not sure if that's kind of like where they're married, because like, again, I know that they definitely want to add a winger. I'm not sure if they're like, all right, it has to be U22 initiative. They're not really worried about the flexibility as far as I'm concerned, because again, the Gustavo Bo's contract is up at the end of the year. I don't like, if he stays, I don't see him being a DP anywhere in the league, really. Like, this is all speculation from my part. I want to point that out, that this isn't kind of inside information, but he's at a stage of his career where I don't know how many teams would be lining up to give him a DP deal, and if he's happy and wants to stay. So again, a long-winded way of saying that even if they did come in with another U22 initiative player, I don't think that they'd be worried about, oh my God, somebody needs to leave right now, because they'll have that flexibility. It's more about planning and what they view roster construction. Like, before they signed Giacomo Veroni last summer, I was asking Bruce Arena kind of, okay, like Dylan Borrero has been a really good signing, and that was a way that you can use kind of if teams want to spend, that's a place that they can spend, because the transfer fees don't count against the salary cap for U22 initiative. And so I was like, are you guys going to go with the young DP so you could add 2 more U22 slots? And Bruce was, in typical Bruce fashion, just super honest. He's like, yeah, not really. Just because Dylan Borrero was a really good signing doesn't mean that everybody who comes in is U22. He's like, we think it's more valuable to have 3 senior DPs and 1 U22 initiative. So I don't know if that's evolved or changed, or maybe it's a player-by-player basis. But yeah, I mean, if they do add another U22 initiative player, like, they won't really be worried about it in the interim.
Tom, I'm wondering, obviously a winger makes sense because Borrero is out for the season. It's going to take him quite a while to get back up to speed. But when you talk about a box-to-box midfielder, I think it does make sense. But the team also has a variety of options there. Noel Buck being a young player who's very, very good, in my opinion, should be in pen into the starting lineup when healthy. Petit Blessing is a TAM player that they brought in during the offseason. And he's had good moments. He's had kind of shakier moments. And you also have some other players like Tommy McNamara, now spotted in training today. He's on his way back. So there's some options there. I think for me, what's hard to understand is, like, what is this team's best formation? Is it a 4-4-2? Is it a 4-3-3? Is it playing with a single striker? So can you help me understand, why does a central midfielder make sense to bring in during this window?
Yeah, I mean, that makes more sense than a winger for me, honestly. Like, I mean, I guess a winger to be able to play, like, just have another look, because I think their best formation is that 4-4-2 tight diamond or something like that, where it frees both fullbacks to get forward, and that's your width. Then you have Veroni, in theory, if he can kind of live up to the DP tag. Veroni, in theory, plays as like the point, the target forward, or whatever you want to call it. Gustavo Bo a little bit underneath him, and then Carlos Hill playing as a 10 free. because then Matt Polster is kind of the anchor in central midfield, and Blessing is when he was at his best with LAFC, he was playing as like a free 8 and like playing as one of those shuttlers in a 4-4-2 type diamond. You can kind of go wherever and you have like a lot of stability around you with Noah Buck and Matt Polster. So for me, it makes sense that they would go for another number 8, trying to get another player who could be starting quality that could add competition or again, if there's an injury, or push those other players that are starters. And it gets all 3 DPs on the field without having to put somebody out of position. So yeah, 4-4-2 type diamonds where I see this team. But Nacho Gil is going to come back eventually. I saw that he was at training today, or he's been moving around. Allegedly, he'll be back at some point. So again, it doesn't make sense to also add a winger, so you can, again, in theory, play a 4-2-3-1, a 4-3-3. But yeah, for me, a 4-4-2 type diamond is this team's best formation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Tom, you won't know more than anyone else that people love transfer rumors. They love any morsels that come out there. Revs fans were recently given a little morsel of something coming from Tom Quinlan, WPRO, mentioning that the Revs were interested in Victor Wanyama, currently with Montreal. He's a player that they might still be interested in bringing in during this window. Have you heard anything about this? Do you think that this is a possibility of happening during this transfer window?
I mean, as of last week, I was told that there was nothing advanced at all, that it was just kind of preliminary. So I was told not to read too much into it. Again, things could change. Again, yeah, they like the player, but you look around, like an example I always go to, there's a team in MLS who have a spreadsheet of their value for every single player in the league. And every few weeks they'll call clubs. How much, if we wanted to trade for this player, how much would he cost? How much would he cost? So these calls happen every day, all the time. Hey, how much would this player cost? So I'm not, that's not to say entirely that there's like nothing to this or whatever, but I try to be careful of like, yeah, like they like this player and everybody would want somebody at the right price. It's just nothing that has been described to me as like advanced or too serious at the moment.
Do you know, out of curiosity, and I know we talked about this a little bit on the podcast last week, Wanyama's a designated player right now, and I know his salary is, I think his total salary is below the max dam DP threshold, but his total compensation is above it. And so, and I don't know if Montreal could eat it. I've have a theory that you could eat a chunk and get it down to that 1.65 million, and then the Revs could take it. Do you know if that's possible for the Revs to even get Wanyama on the roster?
Yeah, I was told that they could get around it. So my assumption is the same as you, is that like if something would happen, that Montreal would hold like, I don't know, 150,000, like whatever it is to just get him to max TAM. And then maybe the Revs trade that amount of money. Like Colorado and Seattle did a loan for Danny Leyva, and Colorado were able to get him on the supplemental roster because Seattle held, it was like 96,000 of his salary. And then Colorado traded them 96,000 allocation money. So it's like, the money was all the same, but it was just the way that he hit the cap. So that's something that I'm assuming that would happen for a trade of Victor Wanyama or anybody else who's kind of over, like that wouldn't be able to fit for a DP. But yeah, again, I think this is all kind of in theory rather than in practice. Again, at the moment, things change quickly. Again, we're talking about all this. There's been so many deals that have been done already, and the transfer window doesn't open for another week and a half. So
yeah, that's true. Well, we're really starving for incoming rumors, because we always hear about outgoing players and players, people trying to poach from the New England Revolution. I don't think there's any bigger name right now than Djordje Petrovic. Two-part question: is there any chance Djordje Petrovic leaves in the summer? And two, is there any chance he stays beyond next winter window?
Yeah, there's absolutely a chance that he leaves in the summer, but I don't think it's a big one. I mean, again, like both sides of this year, like it hasn't gotten to a point where there's like an offer on the table and ready to go. So it's still like a lot of that stage of, there are a lot of teams that like him and a lot of teams that have scouted him and have made their interest known to the Revs. Like talking to somebody at the club who joked, it's like, yeah, dude, every other day there's like a new team that we've heard. He's like, you could say pretty much any team, and I'm assume that yeah, like they're interested in him. Obviously they want to keep him until the winter. The difficulties is that like, if you end up, I don't know what the fee would be. If you end up paying 10 to 12 million for a 24-year-old goalkeeper, however exactly old he is, you want him right now. You don't want to wait until the winter. So I understand why that might be tough, but man, the Revs would have to be blown away by an offer, I think, to even consider it. And it would probably have to be Petrovic pushing for it as well. Like in their perfect world, they keep him for the winter. Anything is possible, but I can't see a scenario in which he's still here after the winter. So I don't know. Again, if I was the Revs or Revs fan, I'd be, if you offered me right now, he could definitely stay until the winter. I would take that and no questions asked and not kind of wager for anything else.
Before I kick it over to Seth too for his next question, I've seen some online sources throw out numbers of like 24, 30 million, which seem absurd to me. Matt Turner was sold for like 7 million. Is that, I mean, are those numbers absurd to you as well? I feel like those are fine.
Yeah, it's insane. Alphonso Davies was 22 million, including add-ons. Like, Douglas Sonina was 10 million up front with 5 million in add-ons. Like, and he was 17 or whatever when he was sold. Like, again, I think Petrovic is a better keeper right now, but like people buy potential. And Chelsea, like, I don't know, is Manchester United coming in with $20 million, 25 million for Petrovic? I'd be kind of surprised, but hey, who knows?
Another player that is obviously gaining interest abroad is Noah Buck. What are you hearing about Buck?
Yeah, a lot of English teams like him. He's one where it would make sense to agree a deal now for the winter, because at his age, like, and the minutes that he's getting here, even if an English club are like, yeah, we even think he might be ready for minutes right now, like, there'd be no real reason to risk, like, to overpay to get him immediately. And again, the Revs aren't going to do it. Like, they're keeping him until the winter at least. But yeah, that's one where I could see a deal being agreed this summer for the winter, a la Tejan Buchanan. But yeah, Buck is, I don't know, around this time last year, whenever he was like just first getting into the first team, I heard some good things from like academy coaches. But again, like, you hear a lot of good things about a lot of good players, and you're always curious to see how they're gonna kind of make the jump to the pro game. And like, I don't know, within his first couple appearances, it was like, I was talking to like Matt Doyle about him, and we're both like, wow, this kid's got a chance, he's legit. And then all winter I was like, I think he's gonna have a legit chance to be a starter. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, yeah, I knew he would have been this indispensable starting level player, but like, just looking at the roster and like talking to people at the club, they were like, yeah, I think he's ready for minutes, and we'll see. Like, they gave him the chance to win the minutes. He won the minutes, and I'm looking at him now. Yeah, so he's got an English passport. He's eligible for England and Wales. I'm pretty shocked that Wales haven't at least tried to call him up yet. Maybe they're a little slow in the passports. But again, English FA has reached out to New England. English FA has been in contact with Buck and Buck's representatives. Like, they said that they plan to call him up in the future. So yeah, it's a really high level talented kid, and it's been awesome to watch him kind of graduate from youth to like really get into the first team here with the Revs.
All right, let's talk about the last one that the Revolution might lose, unless you know of any other players that are on the radar right now. Dwan Jones has been the target of rumors for a few years now, currently with the U.S. men's national team. He's getting up there in age. What do you think? Is Dwan Jones going to make that leap, or do you think someone's going to stay in MLS for quite a while?
Yeah, I think it might be the latter now. I thought last summer if Stuttgart came in, because Stuttgart were supposed to sell their left back, and Dwan was high on their list. They never sold the left back, so obviously they didn't need to buy a new left back. Like you said, his age, it's weird. And like, look, like, I'm gonna explain it how it's explained to me. I disagree with the logic, but like, and there's a lot of expertise here, just because I've been asking about Kai Wagner for 2.5 years now, about why hasn't somebody come in with a $6-7 million bid or whatever, something fair. It's that like teams, and particularly in Germany, don't want to buy a player who they don't think they can sell to England for 20 million in 3 years. And it's like, Dwan Jones isn't old. He's still at the beginning of his prime, and he would be very useful for Stuttgart, or like a mid-table, lower table Bundesliga team. But like, teams don't want to spend the money. And if you're the Revs, why would you accept like a $3 million transfer, like whatever the number is, right? Like, why? What incentive would they have? What are you going to use that money on, both in terms of salary cap and just real spending, to get a player like Dwan Jones? Like, so he's kind of entering that phase for me where it's like really difficult to sell, because the European clubs aren't going to offer a lot of money to make it worth your while, and like, you're not going to be able to replace him. Like, this isn't a rising player. This is one of the best two left backs in the league for me, right? Like, so yeah, I'm curious to see what happens. And like, he's happy. Like, I want to be able to point that out too, that he's not just like, oh man, like a team in the Cyprus first division offered me, like, I gotta go, or like a Swedish mid-table team, see you later, it's Europe, guys. Like, I don't know, Anderlecht reached out, and like another, like Olympiacos and like that, he wasn't like thrilled about it. He's like, yeah, no, I'd rather kind of stay here. Like, again, don't quote me kind of directly on that, but it's like, outside of the top 5 leagues, it's not like a no-brainer, oh my god, I gotta go there. Because again, at his age, it's good competition here. It's gotten him into the national team. Finally, it took a little bit too long for me, but it got him into the national team, and like, things are going well. So it's not like he'll just jump at the first or any random European offer. It'd have to be something that makes sense. And again, a long-winded way of saying, I'm not sure that option is really out there that makes sense for the player and the Revs.
I got some listener questions here from the paid subscribers of the Blazing Musket. first question here. Actually, we've touched on a couple of the other questions. Not the
Cool.
first question, but the first question of this mailbag. For Mark, is there anyone on the Revs that is in jeopardy of being traded away from the Revs when the transfer window open? And obviously, this is sans, Buck, Petrovic.
Right.
Is there another name that's kind of an odd man out? Last year we saw Sebastian Lletget. Anyone on that level that you've heard of?
Yeah, I mean, nothing that's really obvious to me. Nothing comes to mind. And I try to be careful too about even speculating here because I know that people will take it from me as like it might be something real. So like I don't love like trading guys without any without any kind of context or info. But I mean, I don't know because like if you were a GM of another club, like who would you be really looking at? Like if I'm looking at this roster, like they don't really have another center back to move like until Henry Kessler gets back. But even that, it's like I don't know. Christian McCoon's already been on several teams. Like I'm sure he could be available, but like if I was another GM, I'd be thinking, well, like Miami had him, and then New England had him, and where I already forgot where else he was at. But it's like how many different teams have had him? Maybe there's not some right. So yeah, there's no real obvious one here. Like again, if somebody wanted to take like a roll of the dice on Giacomo Brioni, I don't think so. But yeah, there's nothing that kind of strikes me as obvious. But again, like I don't know where they are in senior roster spots. I think that they're good. I don't think that anybody else needs to leave for them to add 2 more players, but like that's always a possibility.
You kind of touched on something else. We got a question. Heel's not going anywhere, right? In parentheses, but are there any teams looking to sign Bo or Vrioni away from the Revs? It's no insight there on the 3 designated players. I imagine
no insight there, and that rarely happens in this league. Like you were talking about extra time a little bit yesterday, and like I forget if it was Goss or Weeby or Kalen. It was just like, yeah, like would you trade Bernadeschi? I was like, what? When has somebody like Federico Bernadeschi been traded? Like Alejandro Pozuelo was such a huge story last year because that was the most like unique, random like DP like in prime DP being traded, and that's like even that was circumstantial because Toronto had to move him off. It was either that or like cut him, right? Like so, I don't know. Like these things don't happen, and like to be fair to these players, like again, if you're Bernadeschi or if you're Giacomo Brioni, like a year ago you were sold on the New England project, and like you wanted to sign for New England. Like in Europe, they can't trade you without your permission. Like here, like we'd be like, hey, you're headed to Houston. I'd be like, what the hell? Like I agreed to sign here like a year ago. Like, so I don't know. I just don't think that that's something that's realistic that happens. Like maybe it will be one day, but for me, that's more of like a rare, like special cases. So no, I wouldn't look into that too much right now.
And
I'm
one
curious,
more.
it was brought up earlier about Sebastian Lletget. He was brought in last offseason. It was a big piece. He was then moved during the season. It was kind of a surprise moment. We've tried to get some information, but it's kind of tight-lipped. FC Dallas mentioned that the Revs were covering some of his contract. Do you know what exactly happened there and why the Revolution would be willing to cover some of his contract? I don't know if you know any of the story about what happened.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was described to me as like nothing bad. Like Bruce and Lletget obviously had the relationship going back to LA, and they still have the relationship. And it was kind of like both sides understood it. It wasn't really working out, but both sides respected each other so much that it was like, Bruce wasn't going to be like, we want you gone. And Lletget wasn't going to be like, I want to get out of here. It was kind of like they figured out, I was like, I don't know. And then, okay, if something worked out. And so like, I was told it was a like collaborative and a good process that like, it was like, yeah, maybe this hasn't worked out as planned. Maybe it'd be better for you. And then, he goes to Dallas and, I know that this seems like a long, long time ago now, but he was still on the cusp of like the national team picture and going to Dallas where they play the national team system that had one of Berhalter's assistants, that had Ferreira and Areola. Like this all made sense. So I think that it was a good landing spot for Lletget, and it made sense for New England. Like he was like positionless here. Like he fits much better into their 4-3-3 as a number 8 than like what he was playing a little winger. He was playing a little 10. He's playing a little 8. Like he was kind of bouncing around. So like, I don't know that like, again, the way it was described to me was that it was really kind of positive on all sides that like, it just a collaborative, like, yeah, this just isn't really working out like we hoped.
Another player that left last year was Adam Buksa, getting transferred over to Lens there. Injury plague season, wasn't able to get on the field a lot. He's now, the center of rumors. Like, where will he end up? Do you think he comes back to MLS at all? And if so, do you think the Revs could be a possibility for him?
I would love for him to come back to MLS. Like, I know that he was very ready to go back to Europe this time last year, whenever it was. So maybe it'd be a little surprising, but again, if I'm an MLS team, like Nashville's the obvious one that gets thrown out. If I'm an MLS team with an open DP spot, like RSL before they signed Chicho Arango, like it's the same kind of like mold. You get a guy who was an absolute killer in MLS. He left and came back real quick. So teams should be looking into it. I don't know where his head's at, like what necessarily he wants. Again, I know that he wanted to get back to Europe, partly because of the national team, partly for whatever else that like it was kind of ready. So I don't know if he wants to stick it out in Europe, or if, again, like I'd imagine he'd be getting paid very well if he came back to MLS. So like that obviously helps change the math and change the decision making. So yeah, again, if I was a GM with an open DP spot and he fit my model, like that's somebody he'd be high on the list. For the Revs, no, like I don't, unless that you get rid of Vrioni, like, because I'd be surprised if Bucha doesn't change clubs this summer, and the Revs can't do it this summer. So that would, even if he doesn't, like, I don't know what Lens's plan for him is. Maybe I should just be careful because I don't know what the hell that they're gonna do. But so maybe they see a future for him. But like, I'd imagine that he's gonna move this summer, right? Like, again, just completely from the outside looking in, it's somebody who didn't play at all because of injury and had struggles, and now that they're in the Champions League, they're a different club than he joined a year ago. So I don't know. Regardless, I'd imagine that would be something resolved this summer, and the Revs can't do anything this summer.
Shifting gears over from the transfer window to something else coming up, the Summer Leagues Cup. One question we got here is, I think Leagues Cup could be great for club soccer in the region, but it doesn't seem like Bruce Arena is too excited about it. He's kind of made some comments about the schedule in general of the Leagues Cup, kind of as the centerpiece of that. What's the feeling about this competition throughout MLS?
I can only speak for myself. Like, I think I understand both sides of that. Like, I'm pretty juiced for it, honestly. Like, I really like the idea of all MLS clubs versus all Liga MX clubs, and this will be a fun tournament on it, honestly. I understand the concerns about the games. I was more excited about this before the playoffs got added a bunch more games. Again, like, I guess I'd consider myself somebody who's conscious of players and player desires. Like, it's a lot, man. Like, every team is going to be playing upwards of, you're guaranteed whatever 40 games in a season if you don't make the playoffs and if you don't advance through any of these competitions. And Philadelphia Union are looking at like 55, right? Like that's a lot, and MLS rosters are thin. Again, I don't want to do the hacky, the obvious. Yeah, they need to open the rosters or more money or whatever. I think for me, it'd be the one way to kind of work around this is like the supplemental roster that most of the homegrowns are on. That should be expanded. Even like, I think that's a no-brainer. That's kind of an easy one because like I was talking to people at like the Red Bulls. They just like, I think we'll talk about like kind of GA Cup, the MLS Next playoffs and all that stuff. The Red Bulls U15 team won their age bracket, and they did really well at the GA Cup as well. And they have a couple kids that they're looking to sign, and just the normal pathway to pro. But they already have X amount of homegrown players in the first team, and like that shouldn't even be a thought to me. Whether it should be, is this player ready to be a professional? Is the pathway that makes the most sense for this player? It should never come into the math. Well, we have 5 players on our supplemental roster. Well, if we do this and we move one of the guys to the senior roster, like that should never get in the way of promoting an academy kid to the first team. So that would be, I think, one way to obscure the games. But like, yeah, it's a lot of games, and I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But I do have optimism that this will be fun.
You're preaching to the choir there, because I look at someone like Nick Firmino, who scored his first goal last year, and he was a player that I think got pushed off of the Revs first team roster. He was on a supplemental roster spot because there were some other academy kids coming in behind him, kind of moving around, like Damian Rivera. And now Damian Rivera is in that spot where he's probably getting pushed out because he's got some younger players behind him. So I think if you expand that from 10 to 15 or 20, and then of course there's also your Ima Boatengs and your Earlywoods juniors and Sweats who take up their veterans, but they take up supplemental roster spots, and that kind of messes up with the academy structure. Speaking of academies, real quick, the Revs have a dynasty now, it seems like, potentially with the MLS Next Cup. Do the Revs have the best academy in the league? It seems like an area they made a ton of strides in under Bruce Arena and Kurt Analfo.
I wouldn't go as far as saying the best in the league, but yeah, what's happening with this academy is awesome, man. Like, 4 years ago, like we'd be killing the Revs Academy right now. I'd be like, who have they produced? They don't put anybody in the first team, all this stuff. Chris Tierney, Kurt Analfo, like these guys deserve a ton of credit for what they've done, like helping develop, produce the likes of Noah Buck. And then again, like Bruce Arena, like a legendary coach, one of the best ever in this league. The one thing you could knock him for in like 2016 was how many young players did he develop with the Galaxy? Like Omar Gonzalez was like the only name that you can come up with. And now look at him. Like he's playing Buck. He's playing, like, there was that game where it was Buck, Jack, and Esmir, that it was like, oh my God, this is the same Bruce Arena that people were like, he will never play young players. And all of a sudden he's playing 3 kids that are 18 years old. Like, I don't know. Like it's definitely, they've done a lot of really good things. I wouldn't go as far as to say best yet, but like they're definitely going up to that top, like the top tiers. Like obviously Philly and Dallas are kind of like the OGs there. Red Bulls are really good. San Jose are doing a lot of good stuff lately. I'm sure that I'm missing teams off the top of my head, but like the Revs, like legit are right up there. And again, like Bruce Arena, Kurtanova, Chris Tierney are three names that come to mind as just like really, really good work to like reverse or build all this up that they've done. Like this doesn't happen by accident. It's not just because Noel Buck was born near New England. Like, there's a lot of natural talent in a lot of these kids, but like if you don't give them the pathway, the platform, then like doesn't really matter. And if they don't believe in the pathway, they'll just go sign somewhere else. So again, I think the Revs deserve a lot of credit.
A lot of the Revs players aren't from New England either. Esmir and Santiago Suarez coming in from around the country. So, Seth, any other final questions to wrap up here?
Tom, I'm going to ask you one. In the offseason, you have Ima Boateng, who was a free agent, and Greg likes to talk about this a lot on Twitter. He comes back signing for less money, around 90,000, I believe, something like that. And we talked to him, and he said all the right things. He wanted to be in New England. He didn't want to move. Are there teams around this league that are kicking themselves for not signing Ima Boateng during the offseason?
It was pretty great. Like the fact that he came back on like trial initially, like that was weird. Like I was like, why didn't if they're like, who he is, right? Like just you could just sign him or not. Like wouldn't you have your decision made already? No, like him, his assist to Bobby Wood, that like phenomenal ball from the left channel that like he bent in. I was like, it just made me so happy to see. Again, Bobby Wood, who people would have said was washed last year, and Ima Boateng, who people would be like, if he's playing, like that's not a good sign. Like, I don't know, man. I always get excited that when these, I guess, squad players, roster players, like are still able to prove that why they're on the roster, and that with a little playing time, again, like it probably wasn't plan A for him to be playing as many minutes as he has, but he's done really well and he's earned it. So I don't know. I think we're too quick to kind of write off players. We're too quick to say, oh, there's a 19-year-old who has the chance to maybe be better. He needs to play. This guy needs to get cut. Like, I don't know, man. This is professional soccer. It's not a U23 league. And I don't know. It's made me really happy to see Boateng kind of playing well.
All right. Well, Tom, I think we're at our limit for time. We could talk to you for another couple hours brain, but we really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Cheers. I'll be back when I'm not moving, so it's easier to plan.